If you have your Bibles, I hope you do. Grab those. Go ahead and have a seat. My name is Kevin Thompson. If we haven't had the chance to meet, I'm the pastor here. Great to be with you today. Thanks, Cal. Ephesians chapter 4 is where we're going to be today. Ephesians chapter 4. A couple of things I want you to be very aware of. Y'all don't care, but y'all need to be in prayer right now because my Razorbacks are in the second half trying to win the SEC championship, and I can't watch it. And I'm focused. I'm focused completely in on you at this moment. Hey, Easter's coming up, and with Easter coming, what's going to happen immediately the week after Easter? I'm here Easter, but I'm also here the week after Easter, and we're going to kick off probably a 40 to 45 week study on the Gospel of John. And so it's one of my favorite books of the New Testament, one of my favorite books to preach on. Jesus reveals himself in amazing ways. And so you have family, friends, guests. People are more open to the Word of God these days, more open to the preaching of the gospel. One of the promises that we can make to you here is every single weekend, if you bring a guest, the Bible will be preached, Jesus will be glorified and magnified, and you see how the outcome goes is up to God's hands. But it should be a great time as we kick off the Gospel of John right after Easter. Don't forget to be inviting your friends and family as well to Easter weekend. Now, if you are new with us today, I think this is the perfect day to be in this place, although it's going to be a little bit different than normal. As a matter of fact, I'm only going to preach for the next 17 minutes. Don't get used to that by any means. But we are continuing and coming to a conclusion today, a specific step today on what we're calling the next initiative. And so we as a church, Bayside Adventure, and then all the Bayside 10 campuses have spent the last several weeks now fixating on what does God have for us as individuals, as families, also as Bayside Adventure, and then Bayside globally. And today, we're going to make financial commitments, believing that with all the vision that we have here, we can actually go faster and farther if we do something very specific at a time like this. So we're going to give in a sacrificial manner. If you're a guest with us today, there is no expectation from us upon you at all. This is it's like a family meal that we've been happily invited you to and so grateful that you showed up to. But we've got all the meal covered. If you want to bring something, that's up to you, but we got all the meal covered, so you don't have to worry about that one bit. But it's a great time to see what the heart of us as a church is, who we are, what we're about. So grateful for Ken for his willingness to be here and share a little bit of what that looks like. It is 5:52 p.m. in Jos, Nigeria right now. And imagine in a normal household, in all likelihood a Muslim household, on this Sunday evening, early evening, there's a little girl out in the yard playing with her siblings, as happy as can be, 8 years old. Everything is going great. And unbeknownst to her and unbeknownst to her parents, a single cell just mutated right now. And that mutation is going to lead to a diagnosis 1 year from now of bone cancer, which in Jos, Nigeria is almost a certain death because there is a lack of medical care. As a matter of fact, that death that is guaranteed 1 year from now, the actual cause of death will not be the cancer. It will actually be abandonment. As that family with limited resources understands that there's no possible treatment that could be taking place, and they are going to have to make the very impossible choice of choosing to abandon this sick child in order to take care of the children that are here now. But here's the thing. That's actually about to change. You see, the fact that cell mutated today and not a year ago is literally going to be the difference between life and death. Because if it happened a year ago and today the symptoms begin to show, because oftentimes that will lay latent in the body for about a year before symptoms arrive. If it happened a year ago that the cell mutated and the symptoms happened today, it would be a certain death. But if the cell mutates today and a year from now those symptoms begin to appear, now there will be an answer of what to do, because already there's a foundation being built in Jos, Nigeria for a children's hospital that a year from now will be a place of refuge for that little girl to go into. And what was going to be a certain death sentence will now be a sentence of life. And get this, in that primarily Muslim community, that is going to cause people to ask questions about the Christian faith, in the same way that the adult hospital that Bayside built many years ago that serves so many patients now has become one of the largest outreaches to those of the Muslim faith. It's seeing a conversion to those of the Christian faith, because they wonder, why would you spend your resources on us? And 16 minutes and 35 seconds from now, we're going to see our kids filter down this aisle and put their little rocket banks upon this stage as they've been having lemonade stands and bake sales and stealing your money to put in their banks. They're very giving whenever it's your money and not their own. And as they put their banks up on this stage, recognize every bank you see, it will be a person, a kid's life who will be changed. And I assure you, within the next few years, one of these days, I'm going to stand up on the stage and we're going to call a teenager out from the back and they're going to walk on the stage and they're going to say, I'm alive today because of what happened in the room this very moment. Literally life and death hangs in the balance at this moment. And whenever you look at the 83 initiatives that we're going to give $8 million to, whenever we look at the mission and the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, not only on this campus, but also across Bayside globally, that we will never look back on this day with regret if we sacrifice. And that's what we're going to do today. Ephesians chapter 4 is going to set the tone for us. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. If not, you have your sermon notes that are here. Let's start reading in Ephesians chapter 4. But to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, this is Psalm 68:18, by the way, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascend mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So Christ himself gave the apostles and the prophets and the evangelists and the pastors and the teachers to equip his people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. From him the whole body is joined together and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. And take out your sermon notes here. If you have your pen, I want you to circle a couple of things. Notice in the very first verse where it says, but to each one, circle each one, but to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. And then go all the way down to the very last line and notice the very last phrase, as each part does its work. Now, whenever you and I are reading that, it doesn't really stick out to us in any way, but the writer here is doing something extremely intentional in that he's using a device to help a listener pay attention to what's going on. And in seminary, we learned that this is called an inclusio. An inclusio is like these brackets where the writer will start one sentence, one paragraph with a word or a phrase, and he'll come back to that exact same idea at the very end of the passage. And it shows us that this entire paragraph, this entire pericope now, is talking about one very specific thing. So whenever you see that it says, but to each one of us has been given grace, and at the end, as each part does its work, that's an inclusio in which this whole passage is making a very singular point. There's minor points that are taking place, but a very singular point, and the fixation now is on this idea of the each. So often we misread the Bible in that every time in the Bible we read the word you, we think, oh, he's talking about me. And he's generally not. That's why the translators need to be Southern. It's y'all. Almost every you in the Bible is actually a plural. It's written to us. But here the writer is going to zero in on our favorite topic, me. And it's a revelation to us that now the work of ministry, the maturing, the building up, all the things that this passage is talking about is not something that now is saved for a pastor. It's not something for church staff. It's not something for somebody who is sitting in the spotlight. But instead, the passage here, notice what it says, verse 7, but to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. So with every single one of us, Jesus has now taken his grace and apportioned it to us specifically, designed it uniquely for us. And one of the ways that you can think about Jesus in this passage is much the same way that you need to think about my grandmother, and maybe your grandmother as well, when at Thanksgiving or Mother's Day or whatever, she was going to cut you a piece of pie. You could guarantee that the piece of pie that your grandmother was going to cut you would be far larger than anything you could eat and far better than anything your mama would ever cut for you. Jesus in this moment is not stingy about his grace. He lavishes, Ephesians is going to say it, he lavishes his grace upon us. But it's not just that he paints his grace for all to take. Instead, he literally calls you by name and apportions to you the very grace that you need. Now notice what the text says. But to each of us, not in masses, but specifically Kevin Thompson, here's the grace that's been apportioned to you. Notice what the text says, Psalm 68. I'm going to preach longer in 17 minutes. Let's just buy into that right now. When he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. That's a random phrase. We have no idea what that means. I get that. But with a little bit of study, we begin to learn that Psalm 68 now is a psalm taking on the imagery of nations. And it's seeing now God as a king of a nation. And when one nation went to war against another nation, if our nation defeated another nation, not only were their kings be killed and all those things, we would take the plunder, the spoils of war, we'd take the plunder of that nation, and our king, within a triumphal procession, in many ways kind of mimicking what happens on Palm Sunday, would now proceed back into our capital city, showing us everything that he had brought to us. And the spoils of war would be apportioned out to different people. What this passage is saying is that God, in the midst of his grace, has gone and won a battle against Satan. He has defeated Satan. We are now victorious on his side. And he is coming back to us, giving us the spoils of war, the spoils of victory. And those spoils are the very gifts that he's given to us. It could be our spiritual gifts. It could be how God has uniquely wired you within your personality, within the passions that you have. It is your financial resources. It's your skills and your abilities. Anything that you have that you can contribute to somebody else is actually a gift from God. Even your ability to give is, in fact, a gift from God himself. And now in gratitude, you're going to hear this all throughout the Gospel of John. It's one of my favorite lines ever. You're going to hear it all the time. Grace received always becomes grace given. That whenever you receive something you do not deserve, you cannot help but begin to give to other people the very things that have been given to you. And so here, as each one of us has been apportioned the grace of God, the very spoils of war now is our own giftedness, our resources, our time, our talent, our treasures, all those things. God did give those to us, and now we want to give those to other people. We do so, verses 9 and 10, with the mindset not of arrogance or pride, but of humility. That's a summary of what's happening in 9 and 10. And then in verse number 11, he says, so Christ himself gave, and he gives 5 examples of just what happens in the church, of different ministries that we could live out. These are not offices. These are not positions. This is not an exhaustive list. He's just showing to us that the church does not reside now on one position, on one gift. Instead, he said, gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers. All of those now to equip his people for the works of service, so that the body of Christ might be built up. And what happens is, as each of us is doing our part, we experience a type of a maturity. And that maturity is evidenced in verse 14 by the fact that we are no longer infants tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by whatever headline comes our way, whatever tweet we experience in the moment, whatever text message is there. There's a stability about us that is not moved by the circumstances around us. And instead, what we're doing, verse 15, is by speaking the truth in love to ourselves, to others, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. And from him the whole body, not part of it, is joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love, notice, as each part does its work. Here's the very simple point of today's message. We grossly overestimate what I do and grossly underestimate what you do. As a matter of fact, here's something you may not believe, and maybe you do, and maybe you haven't thought about it. The fact of the matter is, I am actually most effective when I do what you do, not what I do. I was at Granite Bay a couple weeks ago on a Saturday night. I'm still, kind of doing some married life things, and so was over there on a Saturday night. So I was up in there before service, and I got up in the stands, was greeting this guy, and he goes, "Man, I missed you." I said, "Well, I missed you too." And he goes, "Well, you know what I miss the most?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I know what you miss the most. Like, I'm a preacher. Like, that's clearly what you miss. And now that I'm not there as often, you have to listen to Mark Clark, and who in their right mind wants to do that on a regular? So of course I know what you miss." But I didn't project that way. I went, "Oh no, humbly, what do you miss the most?" And he said, "What I miss the most is on Saturday night, whenever I leave this place, he would stand at that door and wish me a good week. That's what I miss the most." Well, that's disappointing. But what he missed the most was the human connection. It was not what I do on stage. It's that human connection. Last night, I was back at Granite Bay on Saturday night. I don't go every Saturday night, go plenty. And this lady came up to me and she goes, "Kevin, do you remember who I am?" I said, "I'm so sorry, I don't." She said, "Back in the fall, I visited here for the first time. I'm a longtime atheist, and life circumstances had brought me now to this campus. And so I showed up, and I was scared out of my mind. And we were right over there, and I was walking on campus, and you were going somewhere. And I guess you could see in my eyes my discomfort. And you passed me, and you stopped, and you ran back, introduced yourself, and said, 'Hey, is there any way I can help you right now?' And I told you this was my first time on campus, and you walked me where I needed to be. And from that moment on, I have felt completely at home here. And at Christmas, I raised my hand and received Christ." And I asked, who was preaching? Not me. The moment that God used me most in those two situations, it wasn't on stage, it wasn't in the spotlight, it wasn't even doing what I feel called to do. It was that human connection. As I had a part to play that day, I simply played the part. And God can just as powerfully use you in whatever part it is that you're playing as he can with anybody who's in the midst of a spotlight or anywhere else. A friend of mine told the story, Matt, this week. He had a prayer meeting down at Pebble Beach, and he prays a lot at Pebble Beach. And the way he's currently driving the ball, I'm sure he said God's name a lot at Pebble Beach. And so he was there at Pebble, and he and a friend, and they played and all that, and they just wanted to kind of go watch the sunset. And so they found this little spot out on the beach, and they're watching the sunset. They're talking about God and their gratitude. When a guy walks by, here's their conversation and says, "Hey, do you mind if I join you?" And they're like, "No, go right ahead." And he said, "I heard you talking about God." And so Matt and my buddy began to say, "Yeah, here's our viewpoint of God and what's going on." Kind of ask about his life. And they could tell he was not a follower of Jesus. And so finally they kind of made the gospel pitch. "Would you like to you could become a follower of Jesus?" And he said, "No, actually I can't." And Matt said, "Well, why can't you?" He said, "Well, years ago I was going through a very difficult time, and I just made a pledge to Satan that if he would take care of this issue, I would dedicate my life to him." And he did. And the guy rolled up his sleeve, and he had a tattoo of 666. Well, my buddy's sitting there, not a pastor, not seminary trained, nothing. We don't even give him a microphone ever. And he said, and all of a sudden this line came to me. I didn't even know where it came from, but the line just came to me. And this guy said, "I've made an oath to Satan." And Matt, my buddy, said, "Any oath made to a liar is no oath at all." Later, he would realize that was a line from Braveheart. All truth is God's truth. After a 20-minute conversation, that atheist bowed his knee on the beaches of the Pacific Ocean and gave his life to Christ. That's just each one doing his part. God has uniquely positioned you. He's given you a history, a family of origin, a story, giftings, talents, skills, passions, and he's uniquely positioned you all across this region and all across the globe. For those who are watching online, he has uniquely positioned you in places that I could never be. And even if I was there, I'd probably be useless. But God has positioned you there. And now in love, as each one of us speak the truth in love, as each one of us do our part, now God is building his kingdom, and he's growing us up in a sense of maturity. And so the question is, how much grace has been apportioned to you? How much of God's grace do you got today? There's some who sit in this room and you say, "Kevin, I don't have any. I feel nothing of God's grace whatsoever." And if that's you today, there's some great news in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that is none of us are outside the very grace of God. And whatever grace you need today is the very grace that is available to you today, only if you're willing to open your hands in humility and come before God and say, God, I need you. You can have it right now. You can, in your own words, in your own way, the same way I did May 5th, 1988, on my bed as a little boy, just say, God, I need you. And from this moment on, I'm going to follow after you. And if you do that, literally, your eternity can change. And as you leave today, we have some kind volunteers at the I Raise My Hand table. You can stop there. You can come down forward after the service or stop out there for prayer, and they will show you what the next step is. But for the rest of us who might have a relationship with Jesus, how much grace has been apportioned to you? And notice, grace received always becomes grace given. And so now the question is, what will we do with the very grace that God has given to us? In just a moment, we're going to make our commitments to God. Many of you have been praying about it. Some of you, we had a group of leaders who got gathered here Thursday night, and they went before us with a generosity that's probably unmatched in the history of this church. I'm blown away with the generosity of those leaders, many of whom are in the room today and symbolically are going to make that gesture again, even though they made their commitments on Thursday. Some of you, this is still kind of brand new to you. You knew it was coming, but you forgot today is the day. And so in just a moment, we're going to look at these commitment cards. But before we look at our commitment, we want to take these elements and remind ourselves the commitment that Jesus has made to us. Grace received always becomes grace given. So we always start with the activity that God has done for us, the grace that we are receiving. And so if you didn't get the elements whenever you came in, you can raise your hand. Some kind volunteers will hand those to you. We first take out this wafer. This wafer is a reminder that Jesus came and lived in bodily form. He knows fully what it means to be human. He's experienced this for himself. It means there could be things that you're going through within your own life that I have no idea what that is like. But we have one who does know, and that is Jesus himself. And so in honor of the sacrifice that he has made for us in bodily form, we take and we eat. Then we take this vial of grape juice. We're reminded that our sin had a cost. It wasn't just something God could overlook. It wasn't that ours didn't matter much in comparison to how bad the sin of everybody else is. Instead, my sin had a price. The wages of sin is death. And yet Jesus took on that payment that I myself could not pay so that I can experience an eternity with him. And in gratitude for what he has done for me, I take and I drink. Now, having been reminded of what God has done for us, we take out these commitment cards. Now, this journey began 6 or 7 weeks ago, in which we said that culture is a mess. It's an idea and a premise that we all buy into, that culture is a mess. And we said there's one of 3 options that we can take in response to that part of that is we can just sit back and watch. We can just watch as culture burns and go, well, they deserve it, and kind of sit back almost with a holy glee of we have the answer and they don't. Let's watch and see what happens. Some take that approach. Some take the approach that they just stand back and whine. Whine about how bad things are, how good things used to be, how wrong California is, how wrong the government is, how wrong everybody else is. And they just whine and complain about how things actually are. And while it's totally understandable why some will watch and why some will whine, the reality is neither of those are Christian responses. The only Christian response to the brokenness of this culture as recipients of God's grace is to get out and to work and do something about it. That's the only Christian response. And while we can't change everything, we can make very tangible changes in the lives of human beings, which is why in just a moment the kids are going to come down and they're going to show their gifts. And these rocket ships now are going to symbolize the children's hospital that is going to be built this year in Jos, Nigeria. So many of you have already made your commitments, but this is a time now for the rest of the family to do so. But notice this, holding this card in your hand literally does nothing. But if you want to truly get to work in changing the culture and shaping the culture and strengthening the church, life change happens when you click a pen and put that pen to paper. And so it begins with this very first statement, yes, I or we are in. So if you're a couple, you can fill out one together. If you're an individual, you're saying, yes, I'm in. Check that box and say, yes, I am in. now behind this initiative, behind the mission of the church, behind what Bayside is trying to accomplish in the name of Jesus. And then you go down to the next box, and we are making now 3-year commitments. This is a number now above and beyond the tithe, a number in which you're saying, here's what we're going to sacrifice and we're going to give. Maybe you don't have an idea what a number might be. You can turn on the back and get some ideas of what it would look like on a weekly basis. It might sound a little bit crazy, but I honestly believe that every single teenager in the room can pledge $1,000. I honestly believe every teenager can pledge $1,000. Kevin, how in the world can that happen? It's literally a Starbucks drink a week. That's all it is. It's $7 a week over 3 years. If you have that discipline, ends up being $1,000. You might look down that chart and you might find your number. You might look down that chart and maybe your number isn't there. It doesn't matter. I'm kind of in between. Jenny and I are kind of in between some of these numbers. But go back over and fill in the number of what that 3-year commitment will be. And then you can see there's various ways to give. I told the story several weeks ago of a kid that gave a Pokemon card that was worth $30,000. Somebody was sitting in this crowd and heard that and thought to themselves, I have a baseball card collection worth that same amount. And this week he dedicated that baseball card collection. And while we were there, he dedicated 1,000 knives at the exact same time. At our next men's event, we'll sell those. Can you do that in California? In Arkansas, we'd 100% do that, by the way. In Arkansas, it would be like, pay $10 and you get a knife. I don't know if you can do that in California, but there's various ways to give. And we would encourage you, we don't give for tax purposes, but we do want to be wise in what's going on. If your stocks have had great capital gains over these past 5 years, it would be much wiser to give those stocks to the church and then to take the cash and buy the stocks back at a lower price. It would save a great deal on taxes. You actually empower you to give more if you want. And then you can begin to fill out that information of what your name is and all those things. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take just 2 minutes of silence. The piano's going to play. If you're a couple, you can kind of huddled up. If you don't already have a number in mind, if you already do, go ahead and write that down. And at the end of 2 minutes, I'm going to call the kids forward, and the kids are going to come right down this center aisle. And as the piano plays, they're going to put their boxes on this table, and you're going to see it, and you're going to cheer them on. And then as soon as the kids finish, I'm going to stand the crowd. And when I stand you, then what we're going to do as a body of believers is we're going to come and make our commitments. A couple of things. If you're a guest, 1, you don't have to do this, or 2, if you just want to write guest on this, you can still come down and nobody will even know that you're not a member of the church. If you made your commitment on Thursday night, go ahead and just write Thursday there in that commitment so we'll know that we won't double count you. Or if you want to give twice, we're more than happy to take that twice. But as soon as the kids come down, we're going to stand, and the center aisles, you're going to filter to the center, come down, and go to these boxes at the edge. There's a couple boxes in the back if you'd like as well. And then you can exit. You can go back to your seats up these aisles. If you're on the wings, if you will exit toward the wall, come down, and then you can go back up these aisles. We're just kind of a moment of consecrated time in which we're going to take our best, and each one of us, again, it's not about the same amount. It's about the same attitude. And my only encouragement to you, and this is what Jenny and I have done, is whatever number you write down, make sure it is a number that is not just something I can afford. Make sure it's a number that as you write that number, that is actually an act of worship to God himself. And you can bring him your first and best and say, God, this is what I have. Let's take 2 minutes to fill out these cards. Remember, our goal is 100% participation, that everybody in this room would do their part.